The Sacred Cow of American Culture, the Smithsonian Institution, and its Unquestioned Reverence, by Julian, Voice in the Wilderness. In every nation there exists a sacred cow, an institution so revered, so enshrined in the collective psyche, that to question it is to commit a kind of cultural blasphemy. For the British, it's the monarchy. For the Spanish, it's the Catholic Church. And for America, though it may not be clothed in robes and crowns, it is the Smithsonian Institution. The Smithsonian holds a pseudo-sacred place in the American heart and mind. Its marble halls echo with more than historical facts and curated artifacts. They resonate with national mythologies, carefully preserved and institutionally sanctioned. And just as royal loyalists bristle at any critique of the crown, and the devout leap to defend the church, Americans, particularly the media and federal judges, instinctively rise to protect the Smithsonian. It has become America's secular cathedral, and its defenders, the faithful. But not everyone drinks from the marble fountain. I wasn't raised to worship it. Unlike many American children who were dragged on the near ritualistic pilgrimage to Washington, D.C. to be inducted into the hallowed galleries of air and space and American history, I was not born into this cultural covenant. I was born in London, England, raised abroad in Marbella, Spain, ironically similar to the very man whose name adorns the Smithsonian Institution, James Smithson. I didn't grow up walking those polished floors or staring wide-eyed at the Wright brothers' plane. I didn't get indoctrinated into the Smithsonian mythology at the age of 10. To me, Washington, D.C. wasn't a Mecca, and the Smithsonian wasn't a shrine, which may be why I see it clearly, not through a haze of nostalgia or nationalistic sentiment, but as what it truly is, a complex and ironic monument to American identity built on British aristocratic shame. A new world, a royal bequest. It is a strange paradox, a nation that severed its umbilical cord from the British monarchy and revolution, that violently rejected royal authority in favor of freedom and self-rule, ends up building its central institution of cultural memory on the gold of a British aristocratic bastard. The Smithsonian exists because James Smithson, an Englishman born in Paris, bequeathed his fortune to a country he never visited. But first he tried to give his fortune to relatives, and even Madame de la Batutte. If that failed, he left a contingency in his will, that the entire estate, minus a pension for his gardener, was to be given to the United States, specifically in Washington, to erect the Smithsonian Institution dedicated to the increase and diffusion of knowledge. Why? Because in Victorian England, Smithson was a persona non grata, the illegitimate child of Hugh, the first Duke of Northumberland, and Elizabeth Hungerford Keat Macy, heiress of royal lineage. In Britain his existence was a stain on noble reputation. He had money, but no name, intelligence, but no inheritance of status, no seat at the royal table, no pomp, no introduction by the butler at state banquets, no ascot, and no legacy. America, however, had no such pretenses. A young nation hungry for identity, legitimacy, and grandeur. So when Smithson's fortune, 105 sacks of British gold sovereigns, crossed the Atlantic in 11 crates and landed on the desks of a deliberative Congress, the nation received it as if it had been handed down by Providence itself. Here was their institutional messiah, gift-wrapped in English coin. But some were not so thrilled. Senator William C. Preston was appalled, arguing the donation was a cheap way to immortalize the donor. Preston warned Congress that if they accepted the donation, every whippersnapper vagabond that had been traducing our country might think it proper to have his name distinguished in this way. He was not alone. Senator Calhoun chimed in that it was beneath the dignity of the United States to receive presents of this kind, even from British noble lineage. But Congress disagreed, and on May the 2nd, 1846, passed the Smithsonian Act of Congress. From royal bastard to American icon, Smithson left behind no revolutionary discovery. The mineral smithsonite was named after him, but beyond that, he was more a well-funded gentleman scientist than a trailblazer. Rumors swirl was his fortune from gambling, from a secret blackmail agreement with his royal lineage, or guilt-ridden royal parents ensuring their distant son needed for nothing. No one knows. What we do know is that his very existence was buried under the weight of royal shame, and that the United States turned that shame into a shrine. And in doing so, America embraced the bastard and built him a temple, one with 21 museums and 154 million artifacts. This irony is almost too rich to be true. The bastard son of British royalty, rejected at home, immortalized in the capital of the nation that overthrew that very royalty. The psychological imprint. What happens when a nation builds its historic memory on a foundation like that? When it raises generations of children to equate national truth with institutional display? When every major event, innovation, and person is interpreted, curated, and sanctified within the framework of a museum complex that owes its existence to British royal dysfunction. The result is psychological. The Smithsonian becomes a source of identity, an emotional anchor, a trusted authority. It's no longer just a museum. It's a storytelling engine. It tells Americans who they are, what they've done, and what to believe about their past. And like any powerful storyteller, it controls the narrative, the ideology that can so easily be hijacked and become improper. That's why criticism of the Smithsonian isn't just uncomfortable, it's sacrilegious. From trustee to taxpayer. When Congress accepted Smithson's gold, they agreed to act as trustees of his bequest. They borrowed the gold to run the government and agreed to pay 6% annual interest on the principal to fund and operate the new institution's construction. But over time, that fiduciary duty morphed. The interest payments faded. The trust wasn't managed. It was absorbed. And now the Smithsonian is federally funded by taxpayers, many of whom are unaware that they're the beneficiaries of a broken trust that they are paying for. This quiet shift is more than administrative. It reflects how the sacred becomes bureaucratic. The Smithsonian, once an independent beacon of scientific and cultural exploration, has become a government-managed apparatus supported not by British gold, but by the American working class. And worse still, in 1976, Washington Post staff writer Charles Krause uncovered the existence of private corporations within the Smithsonian castle walls, used as slush funds where taxpayer dollars were laundered, vanishing without a trace. the cult of the display case. And yet, the reverence only grows. Americans instinctively defend the Smithsonian as if their national identity depended on it, because for many, it does. It has become a curator of the national soul, with the aura of impartial truth and institutional integrity. It's the final word in historical arguments, the final authority in cultural disputes. When the Smithsonian says it, it must be true. But this is the danger, because when an institution becomes sacred, it can no longer be questioned. Its omissions, biases, and political entanglements become invisible behind marble walls and glass cases. The very tools it uses to preserve history can also distort it. Conclusion: sacred or sober? The Smithsonian is not evil. It's not that corrupt in the conventional sense, but it has become untouchable, and that is perilous. Institutions must be scrutinized, especially when they claim to represent the entirety of a nation's story, both past and present. We must ask, what stories aren't being told? Who benefits from the display? Whose truth is enshrined, and whose is excluded? As someone not raised under the shadow of its pillars, I can see what others may not. The idolatry cloaked in education, the agenda-driven ideology undergirding the mythology masquerading as history. America must remember, sacred cows make the best hamburgers, and sometimes the institutions we worship most need to be brought down to eye level and be examined, not exalted. This is Julian Raven, Voice in the Wilderness. You can read the whole juicy story in my book, Odious and Cerberus, An American Immigrant's Odyssey, and his free speech legal war against Smithsonian corruption. Available at all major bookstores and on Amazon. Thank you.